Hey everybody, welcome back to Comic Book Hero. Today I'm here with my boy Cal Ellis, the man himself, the supreme on comic books. Cal Ellis is the one we're going to be talking to and posing questions to about comics. Say what's up, Cal.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Ready to rock.
So there's been some recent news on the comic book front that we wanted to talk to our resident expert about. The first one we want to talk to you about is X-Force #1. Yep, we're talking about that comic from 1997, I think it was made. They sold 5 million copies, and now it seems that for some odd reason, from what I've seen on Bleeding Cool, that they're saying that the comic was going for about the comic with the card was going for about $100. So the comic came out actually back in 1991. So hey, can you give us a little bit more about that? Is this true, or was this just some type of a fluke that happened? Give me a heads up.
It's both. Now, what you have to remember, in comics, and the same thing in cards, rarity and scarcity is what drives the market. But you do have these flashes where books will skyrocket in price. But you have to remember, when that happens, what goes up must come down. So in this instance, the X-Force books, in X-Force books, if you could get an X-Force book and grade it, and it came back at 9.8, you had a $200 book. The trouble was there were so many of them, and they were bad, that it's really hard to see the condition of the book. So that's one of the reasons why a high grade 9.8 CGC graded copy of the comic would get you that premium in terms of $200. It might be higher now. But in each bag, they put a card. The bag that would get you the most money, and for the most part, an X-Force book was like $1. And it was really cheap at the end of the day. You could spend like a couple of dollars and you could get that same book. But in each bag was a card. The one that was the most valuable was the one with the Deadpool card. And this is like on a rare day, you might get as high as $10 for that one because it had the Deadpool card in it. What happened recently, there was a surge in sales of rare cards, especially rare cards that came along with Marvel. Now, what a lot of people don't know is there was some video on YouTube where these guys have been pushing these cards for I don't know how long, but they were saying, look, these are good cards to get because they're rare. Not a lot of people have them, so on and so forth. And so guys went gangbusters going after these cards. Some of these cards were selling. One guy put up a graded 10 gem card for $10,000. Ended up selling it for either 4 or 6 grand. Ridiculous numbers at the end of the day. Now, of course, I sat back and said, no way that this thing can last, because there are probably all these guys who are just sitting on these cards now, just sitting on them. And as soon as they hear this news, they're all going to put them up for sale. It's not like these things are that rare at the end of the day. A lot of guys, I spent $500 and they would see the money. Now they're going to start putting these cards up, and that's where it would come at the end of the day. But to answer the question, yes, it was a surge, and yes, it is a fluke.
Wow. So I would not have thought that this would have been the case, because this is, I don't know if you can see, but here we have the Deadpool card, and this is the only one that would have actually given you some value, other than the guys who are trying to move the market. Kind of reminds us of the GameStop situation, right? If you get enough people who are willing to spend and do stuff, you will see. But wow, that is very interesting. Well, thank you about that, Cal. So is there any other effects? The market has dropped, the prices have dropped, so people who bought it are left holding the bag, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's...
If you bought the card hoping that it was going to be a good investment, good luck. I really don't think it will, but hey, things can change.
Is it because really the scarcity issue? There's just so many that were sold. According to
there were some cards that were legitimately scarce. But what happens is that, okay, this card is legitimately scarce, but then guys start looking for all of the cards, and then that spreads, and then they all start rising up in value and in price. Let me not say value, let me say price, because so many people are hunting them. And once it's starting to be hunted, that hot book, the price will raise, and the people who make out are the guys who already had the cards. And then usually what a lot of, especially guys who are new to the game, what they want to do is they want to get a card, they'll pay a premium for it, they want to then ship it off to be graded, and they don't realize by the time you get the card back, this whole drive for all these cards it's done. So now you got the card back, you can't get the money that you were looking for, or worse, you bought that card for, let's say you bought it for $1,000. Well, how long are you gonna have to wait so you can sell it for 2,000, if ever? So these are some of the things to keep in mind. It's very similar to what goes on in the stock market. This really could be considered a short, where they start putting in all this money to this stuff, knowing that it's going to fall. The only trouble is there's nobody to sell the stuff to when it falls. Nobody wants it.
Wow. Well, look at this here. I have this screen up with the X Force #1 collector's issue with the card. It's supposed to have the Deadpool card, and they're selling it for 175. So and this is just one day ago. So I guess the price has definitely dropped since then. You know.
Yeah, it. I mean, it was going on. I knew other guys who. I knew guys who were like, "Yeah, I've got all these cards. What should I do with them? Should I sell them now? Should I send them off to be graded?" And I advised. I said, "You should just take the ones out, sell as many as you can, and keep the ones you know that may actually appreciate with some value later on. You have a few of the Deadpool cards, hang on to them. Deadpool's a popular character. This was one of the rare cards. Everybody was still looking for it. So you can hedge your bet on that one. But a lot of times, guys get stuck because they're like, oh, I don't want to miss out on any money. So I don't want to sell them and then find out 6 months later, oh, they're going for 3 times the amount. So, what do I do? My whole thing is, look, sell it. You spent how much? $500 on it? If you can get $500 per card, sell those cards as quickly as possible, because you're not the only person with those cards. There were a ton of those cards made, and a lot of guys seem to forget that. There were a ton of those cards made. Sell it before everybody else who has their cards gets theirs put up. That's with stuff like this. That's pretty much the basic rule. I do not chase the hot book unless I believe that book has legs. Meaning that if I'm going to spend $50 for it now, I'm going to be able to sell that for $200, $300 coming down the pipe. That this is going to be a really good buy, or an investment book, if you will. And this is something I'll be able to sell later. But otherwise, it's just hot. There's a whole bunch of other people chasing it too. It soups up the price, and then when it's not hot anymore, who wants it?
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you for that, bro. So another question we have is the whole thing with Taskmaster #3. This is a limited issue series. It was supposed to be in conjunction with the Black Widow movie. Now we know who one of the bad guys was. The Taskmaster was supposed to be on Black Widow. They were trying to hide that last year, before they before the whole pandemic thing came out. But yeah, the comic book is showing that. So the question I'm having is that they're saying that some of the prices of the #3, which they delayed the whole series, and #3 had a pretty low print run, that it is now going for anywhere from $15 to $25. What's your take on that? I mean, is that something that will hold, or something that won't hold? Something that's interesting?
And
And that's
characters are
because it's
different.
the first appearance of the Korean version, version of
Captain America.
Captain America. Yeah. So I mean, I'm seeing something here
Depends.
on eBay right now, which they're going for $35. And let me see if I can share the screen with you real quick. $35 right now. You have this Taskmaster. It's not even graded or anything, but it's $35.99. Basically going for what I think the original price is, like $3.99, so it's almost 10 times the amount. Is that not crazy? What's your take on this, bro?
No, that actually might be a good buy. Characters, characters, cards and comics are different, obviously, but characters are different because, you're buying into a book because it's the first appearance and so on and so forth. Nobody knows where that character is going to go. So this is a character who might end up in a film, might get its own series, develop a following. That may be a very good book to have. And the pattern with Marvel has been a lot of the characters they've introduced. A lot of these guys haven't even done anything yet. You look at characters like Riri Williams, who's just recently been cast. You look at other characters like Shuri. They're not characters who have really had a long history or a lot of activity, even within the Marvel universe. But their first appearances have all, skyrocketed in price. All skyrocketed in price at the end of the day. Part of it was that these were lower print books. There were a whole bunch of people reading Black Panther, especially not the second issue at the time, or people who were hunting down books because it was Riri Williams or America Chavez. Now people will pay more attention to it, and because of that, you'll see that rise in price. And you never know. There's a big push for diversity in the films. You may actually get to see a Korean version of Captain America. It may happen. Character may actually be developed. So that one might be a safer buy. I would not buy it for $30 or $40, but that might be a better buy.
Interesting. And of course, if you could find it, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, so I mean, Mr. Comic Book Hero himself, have you been seeing any particular trends going on lately that you wanted to discuss or say anything about?
I usually try to keep the trends to myself so I can make the money.
Okay, we'll leave the trends. Or any things that you want to just discuss?
DC Comics is having a much better year than anticipated, and it's because of the Future State.
Are you serious? The Future State is, I know they've been selling when I go to the comic book store, but I
They're
can't.
outselling Marvel, which is always good. They're
But they,
outselling Marvel. I mean, DC's kind of in a Charybdis and Scylla situation where they really need to produce. And fortunately for them, Future State is produced. A lot of people, these were more expensive books. These were not regular price books. These books were $2, $3, $4 more expensive at the end of the day, but people bought them. And they were filled with first appearances, sprinkled over here, and different types of storylines. But as far as I know, the response from fans has been healthy, as you can see within the sales. That's going to pass on because DC is going to continue on with some of these series, and they're also going to continue Future State into what's called Infinite Frontier, and they're continuing along those lines. But DC, I mean, right now a lot of guys look at the Marvel stuff and they'll buy the first appearances, and I'm looking at the stuff in Future State. I'm saying, hey, I hope you bought some of those first appearances. I hope you spent some of your money there, because comic books overall, I believe, are undervalued as a collectibles market. And some of that is starting to shift. You had books like the Star Wars series from Marvel, and you could have gotten, the complete run was 1 to 108, including 108 being a later printing. But that was the complete run. There was a point where you could have gotten that whole series for a couple $100, or maybe $100 at the end of the day. Now you're looking upwards of $1,600, $2,000 for that series, and that's much closer to where it should be. You have some really key appearances there. First appearance of Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, okay, C-3PO, R2-D2, and that's just in the first five, six issues. You have all those first appearances. Then other people start getting series. Wedge Antilles, okay, that book lights up. You have the first appearance of Boba Fett, who is arguably the most popular character in Star Wars. He's appeared on probably more covers than just about all of them, or at least that's the way I would think of it. I might have to backtrack on that one. But
and maybe introducing another Boba Fett comic too. I think there's supposed to be a big Boba Fett announcement tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, Boba Fett, I mean, he's going to have a series coming out. So, and he's always been a strong draw. And his first appearance was going for, like, at one point you could have got his first appearance for $50. You're not getting it for $50 anymore.
Get out.
Okay, $50. Even when they were telling you that Boba Fett was being mentioned on The Mandalorian, even when you saw The Mandalorian and you saw the armor, when everybody sees that armor, are they thinking of The Mandalorian? No. You're thinking of Boba
Fett. Good point. Cal.
Even then, his book was still reasonable. You could have gotten it, even then, at the height, you could have still gotten a nice copy of Star Wars 42 for like $100. If you played your cards right. If you didn't, if you looked around, you could have still gotten a nice copy of it. Good luck doing that now. Okay, so the comic market, I think, is undervalued overall. And that's because a lot of what happened in the 90s, where the comic market took a really big hit, and then it became, all right, the only thing that's worth any money is Action Comics 1, Amazing Fantasy 15, and everything else, trash. And then, slowly but surely, grading came in, so that locked in value, and then people started buying more into it. And then, of course, those Marvel films really helped a lot of stuff to take off, because there was something to actually make a standard for in terms of where the comics were going to go. But That's Marvel. So a lot of guys are throwing a lot of money into Marvel, 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 Marvel. And I'm like, hey, I scoop up as much DC stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah, everybody else is running to Marvel, this, that, and the other. They just want the Marvel book. I'm like, I'm fine. I'll pick up all these DC keys over here, and I'm just sitting on them, waiting, because the same thing is going to happen. A lot of people look at Marvel and they're like, yeah, this, that, and the other, and DC, but I'm like, no, 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 no. Eventually, DC is going to get it right. And when DC gets it right, now you got two, I almost said juggernauts. Don't want to give Marvel too much credit. You have two powerhouses, okay? Because it's not like Marvel has better stories than DC, or even that Marvel has better characters than DC. Marvel has executed better than DC at this point. Eventually, DC will get it right. And I believe one of the things, I saw the trailer for the new Superman show. That trailer I saw, I was like, this actually doesn't look awful. And then I saw a couple of reviews and I said, this doesn't look awful either. This might actually do something. If they can get that right, if they can get Superman right on TV, then that's a sign that, okay, maybe you guys can get him right for the films. And if you can get him right for the films, you can get everything right. So that's just a matter of time. So I put my money into all those undervalued books, and I just sit and I wait, and eventually everybody else will catch up, and I'll make my money.
All right. This is good advice. Good advice. But yeah, I mean, thanks. The Boba Fett stuff. Wow. That's why they call you the comic book hero, bro. Your advice goes a long way. It definitely helps out with a lot of stuff. But one thing I want to circle back to the future state is that these
One thing I want to say before you go to future state, I love Boba Fett. I like Star Wars like everybody else, but I love Boba Fett.
Oh yeah,
I had a Boba Fett figure when it first came out. The leg broke. I cried to my father. He bought me another one. I think I broke the leg again. He's like, "You're out of luck, buddy. You're not getting another one." I had a graded copy of the first appearance of Boba Fett. It was a newsstand variant. It was a CGC 9.8. Sold it, for reasons, I had to sell it along those lines. So I already know what it's like. I know that I'm not probably going to get my hands on another copy like that cheap, or another book that I can grade. I mean, I graded that book myself. I didn't buy it 9.8. I had the book. I sold it. I graded it. It came back a 9.8, and I forgot how much I sold it for, like $700 or something. But these are to see that character finally come into its own, and he's been so popular for so long, and it's like people are just realizing he's had so many series, so many covers, and this is why I say things are undervalued, because Boba Fett's first appearance outside of anything else is in a comic book.
Did not
You have
know
this incredibly popular character, and his first appearance outside of the films is in a comic book, and that comic book you could have gotten for peanuts for decades. It's just crazy.
Well, I guess you got to thank John Favreau and Dave Filoni for bringing them back.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's cool. I mean, quick question about this though: if they were to put the Mandalorian in the comic, do you think that would be worth something to buy?
Oh hell yeah!
Okay, cool. So getting back to future state in DC, really, DC's had a bloodbath, in the last year when AT&T took over. So the thought was, there were many stories that were by many different stations, by Bleeding Cool and several others, where they were talking about, how much the editorial, the writers got cut, especially the older, more established writers, and and they definitely push up some newer, younger ones, and for less money naturally. But the question is that they thought that this could impact the quality of the comics, and here you go with Future State, and they're doing gangbusters. I mean, what's your take on that in terms of DC going
Execution. I mean, DC is just in a bind. I mean, they had you had New 52, and the whole thing with New 52 is that originally they were going to move from New York to California, because that way they thought that they could have better proximity to Warner Brothers, and that way they could get stuff done better in terms of films and TV and so on and so forth. And yes, that worked, but it's expensive to be out there.
Yep.
It's expensive to be out there. And so these guys all have to justify, okay, you got to justify, the rent and all this other type of stuff, which means these comic books now have to make more money. They have to make more money than they did before, which I think is stupid at the end of the day. These guys, the comics are going to be responsible for so much at the end of the day in terms of series, but they want the comic books to make all this money to justify them being out there. I was like, if that's the case, let them come back to New York. We'll welcome you back. Come back, DC. We love you right over here. But Future State works because it shows, look, these things are, comics can be viable. They did a lot of trimming, I mean, in terms of firing people, but these books were coming down the pike anyway, which means that these guys, I don't know, because even if you leave them on, I don't know if the profit goes as far. Well, it's not. The more people you got on, the less profit you're going to have, and that's what they always consider firing people anyway, profit savings. And so, oh, no, I'm sorry, not profit savings, but cost savings. They consider not paying a salary a cost saving. That's how it's done in business. But DC was in that particular bind, and they executed. Future State is good execution. What was it? It was like, okay, these are the same characters you know and love, but we're going to throw them into different situations. And the best thing about these situations, they're not long lasting. It's just 2 months. It's just 2 months that Superman's going to be fighting on this alien world as a gladiator. Okay, it's just 2 months that we're going to see Batman, and he's going to be two different guys. It's just 2 months, where we're going to see the Suicide Squad doing this, or this guy's going to be dead, okay, or that guy's not going to be, or that guy's going to end up being the most powerful person in the universe. It's just 2 months, so they get to play around, have fun with it, and then I heard all of these guys griping. Oh, I'm not going to be buying any books for 2 months. Well, I guess they were the only people because a whole bunch of people did buy them. And so it gives people, it's hard with these characters that are so well established. You can't do too much with them to take them away from their core because people don't like that. But in this situation right here, you can still have the core, but because it's the future and it's a totally different scenario, you can throw them into it, and it doesn't have to affect the overall story, the canon stories. So you can just move on from it. 2 months and we're right back. Okay, we're right back to where we started, and we can now tell stories again. So that was smart on their part. They have been planning this for a while. This was the to be honest, the remnants of what Dan Didio wanted to do with this 5G thing that he had. He had wanted to do something was going to happen, and it was going to lead into these particular characters. I don't know if it happened quite the same way. And it wasn't supposed to be for 2 months. But you see that the execution is there, and when the execution is there, you get the interest. Okay, you get the sales. So that's what happened. That's pretty much what happened for them. We'll see if they can continue this on with Infinite Frontier, which they probably will be able to do that because you have a lot of guys curious. You have guys who are buying it. Well, maybe this is going to be worth something. But for the most part, you have a lot of guys who want to read the stories. They're like, hey, this looks interesting. I want to read this.
But hold on a second.
This looks a little bit different.
Isn't this the whole thing with 2099, Spider-Man 29, the 2099 universe? Didn't DC do this already and Marvel do this already? And they eventually wrapped up many of their comics. I mean, the only one I remember that's coming back they've done like 2 shots with Marvel with their 2099 titles, but
this is closer to.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Batman Beyond is probably the only thing that came out of that whole world of going to the future. So I mean, is this something that really would have been something that
it's not quite the same as 2099. It's not quite the same as 2099 because 2099 was, okay, we're going to jump to the future of the Marvel Universe. And those characters that you saw in 2099, they had no connection to the past at all. Okay, this was Spider-Man. It was a new year, and this guy wasn't related to Peter Parker. He didn't know Peter Parker. So this was like its own series at the end of the day. This is just, imagine if Marvel had started in this time, and so we have this new guy. We have this new guy over here, Acosta. I can't remember his first name, and he's Spider-Man, and that was pretty much it. It was the same thing. The Hulk, all those characters, for all intents and purposes, those are just new characters, and they went as long as they did, with the fan base that they had, and that was it. Future State is different because these are the actual characters that you still know, in addition to new characters, and they are connected. It was one of the things DC used to have going for it with Legion of Superheroes is that the Legion of Superheroes was set in the future, but they had a connection to the present through Superboy.
Right.
So, and that for me, I mean, people disagree, but that for me always kept them viable because anytime it started to get too far out into the future, where it started to get too distant from what the DC universe was, because the DC universe is set in the present. So anytime that stuff used to start really getting too far, you could always throw Superboy in there or have him come back to Superboy and then, reconnect them and then, get everything going again. And when they decided there was no Superboy, I think that became a little bit it did become harder, and but anytime they have that connection, for me, that's always when the Legion is strongest, because that's from their basic origins. So yeah, they've done it before. DC has done it before and executed it pretty well. Marvel has done it before, but without any link to the present, and with the 2099 series. It I'm not really it's not really coming to me right now of any series that they did where they threw some other people into the future. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. They did what I don't know if you did you read the MC2 line?
No, I didn't read that one.
MC2 line was another line that was set with Marvel in the future, and this was with Spider-Girl, and Spider-Girl was the daughter of Spider-Man.
Okay.
And they had other characters too. They had what is it, like they had the son of the Juggernaut, Avengers Next. It was like the new Avenger, and they showed the other guys were still around. Some of them were still around and they were still adventuring. Other guys had retired, so they had done a little bit more that was a little bit more connected. It was a lot more connected than what they did with the 2099 universe. The only trouble was, and again, this is the problem, is that you still had you had the older guys, the original heroes, and they were pretty much put out the pasture. They weren't doing anything anymore, and that is always going to be an issue, because people are kind of like, well, we still want to see the other guys. We still don't want to get rid of them. We still want to see them. We want to have some interaction with them, rather.
Oh,
And so Future State works because you have the new cats. You have Superman of Metropolis, Superman's son John Kent, but you still have stories. You still have stories with Superman. And so you get to enjoy both. You get to enjoy both of them. You have the new Wonder Woman, and you still have, Wonder Woman, the Wonder Woman that we all know. And the same thing with a whole bunch of these other characters. So they're all running around. It's all connected. It's all just one big haberdashery of fun, if you will. And it's only 2 months. So if you love it, hey, great. Okay, you had a good 2 months. And if you don't like it, hey, it's only 2 months. And then you're right back to where you started.
All right, cool. All right, so then thank you very much for Cal for that information. So definitely we think it's just as a recap. One, X-Force, right now with the card, you think that's a bubble market. So if you can stay away from that, stay away from that. If you have something already, hold on to it. For the Taskmaster number 3, with the Korean Superman, Tae Guji, I believe it is. If you have that, good investment, hold on. And Future State, if you can get a hold of those, particularly the first appearances, grab it and run with it. And of course, our favorite, Boba Fett, if you have that too, don't lose it, the original appearance, because it's practically priceless.
If you're a fan like me, try to keep it. Try to keep it. Money's not everything. Try to keep it.
Hey, so if you like what we talked about, please comment, give us a thumbs up. Spin Rack.
Out.
Out.